share screen?
Yep, press share screen.
Great. Well, welcome to yet another Black History Lunchtime conversation. This is going to be the last but one, penultimate of this season, and then we'll refocus again come September-ish. So we're going to, well, welcome to everyone, and we're just going to ask John Tyrrell to start with. He's going to be telling us about his De-colonising Education Development Project, the DEEP project. So that'll be really interesting, John. So you're just sorting out your share screen, are
Yes,
you?
I am. I just brought up the wrong picture. Not what I wanted.
Well, we'll let you do that. And it's nice to see Christine White with us as well today. Thank you, Christine. That's good. So we'll see how we get on. So this session is our, as I say, last but one, but next week we're going to have a really interesting session. I'm sure this one's going to be interesting, but next week we've invited some really special guests. We'll be hearing from the Jamaican High Commissioner, His Excellency Seth George Ramakan, from Professor Charlotte Williams, who will be talking about embedding Black history teaching in the curriculum in Wales. We'll also be hearing from Professor Robert Burrows, who's going to be talking about the students who came to the African Institute in Colwyn Bay. I think that'll be interesting. I know, Christine, you've put me on to Robert, so that's really great. So that's an opportunity not to be missed. So then, as I say, with our reviews and everything, we'll then work on putting together a program for next year. So how are you doing then, John?
Yeah, I'm there. I've got it on my screen. Can you see?
No.
Not yet.
Right.
Can you help, Simon?
So you need to click on the share screen button on the little arrow, and it should bring up.
I think I've lost that screen now.
Okay, so try and
Oh, right.
click it again, and then you have to choose. It will give you a box allowing you to choose either to share anything that's on your screen or just a particular
Yeah, well,
document.
I've got my screen on, but now I've got your screen back.
So try again. The little green, it's highlighted in green.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
Yeah, click on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then choose the document or to share just all of your screen.
Well, one of the things that Black History Lunchtime conversations are about is getting competent with Zoom. Say that over the last session.
My picture's there, but it's at the back, and I can't bring it forward.
But when you click on the share screen box, you should have a pop-up that comes up saying select a window or an application that you want to share. And then you just click the one that should be highlighted already, screen, and then share.
Okay.
Here we go.
There we go. Got it.
Right. Okay.
Brilliant. Success.
Okay.
Okay, over to you then, John.
Right. Okay. This is a kind of prelude to the project where we're taking this question about the well, it's educational subnormality, and it's going back to Bernard Cord, who published this in 1971 about how children, West Indian children, were made educationally subnormal, and that led to a number of other things happening in education in the UK. But anyway, that's been brought back to light, and there was a program on the BBC, which is, you can still see. I should have actually made a link, put a link to it on this, which I still can do, but it's been shown. Did people see it? It went back to Cord, and Cord himself was speaking in it. And this last week, actually, there was another program which he was speaking with Kahindi Andrews. So that was interesting. I didn't get to see that, unfortunately, but the question was, are children, black children still being made educationally subnormal. So I'd like to have see the outcome of that program. Anyway, what we have here is Carlton Duncan is one of our team. There are 5 of us in the team, and Carlton is one of them, De-colonising Education. And he was the first black headmaster of a secondary school in the UK when he went to White Manor in Bradford. And he subsequently came to Birmingham and became head teacher there. And George Dixon School. So I worked quite a bit with him at the time. And another person that many of you know is Gilroy Brown. He was also the head teacher of Foundry Primary School, which was one of the feeder schools of George Dixon. That's in Winson Green, in the shadow of the prison. So Gilroy was head teacher there for some time, and then he became an advisor. And he's still now acting personally as he's going all around the country at the moment, doing work with schools on these issues. And he's written a little bit, part of his in the introduction. Now I'm trying to move this down. Right.
Roll it round.
Yeah.
Right, good.
So, all right.
Yeah.
So the project is looking at issues. The AFOR, All Faiths for One Race in Birmingham. I chaired that in the mid-80s actually, and it was a voluntary organisation, but it produced a number of books on education, on policing, on health, and so on. So that had something called Issues and Resources. So we decided we would work on some sort of update for that. And so I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. But the issues obviously portraying themselves that have brought out the issues very strongly are Black Lives Matter and COVID-19. It's really shown up, and there's so many things that have come out from that. I mean, we're not short of materials now as we were in the 80s and looking for stuff. It's presenting itself. The problem now is sorting out what is good. And we're talking about, the thing is talking about decolonizing education, but we're talking about decolonizing a lot more than that. So, as we said, education is fundamental in dealing with discrimination and injustice. I took this from a young woman who was speaking in an interview, and she's saying, look, we've got to start here because it includes everybody. So education is important, but we're talking about education and beyond, because we're seeing issues, as we know, in policing from America, but also in the UK. And you know, I've had first-hand involvement with a number of cases of deaths in custody and so on. In Birmingham in the 80s and 90s. So I'm quite familiar of these issues, and Lance Dunkley and I supported a woman who'd been beaten up in Wolverhampton when she being arrested by the police. And that was a long-standing issue. Now, while we've got this anti-racist movement, and it says here both Scottish and Welsh governments are planning to implement an anti-racist curriculum by 2022. In contrast, the UK government in Westminster issued the Sewell report. And it says, which like Lord Swan denies that our institutions are racist. So we believe that the report should be scrapped. Now, this campaign that this document's about is about implementing finally and formally the Rampton and Swan reports. And actually what happened there, well, this is what Carlton's pointed out to us, because he sat for 5 years, both on the Rampton and Swan reports. Rampton was issued in 1979, and its title was the education of, to do with the education of West Indian children. Remember that. And one of the points that Rampton brought out was racism was an issue, and institutional racism. Anyway, as Carlton tells the story, that Swan was asked to take over, and remember the report, they changed the report that came out in 85 was Education for All. That was the Swan report. Now, Lord Swan, he self-confessedly said that he didn't know anything about the subject. So he was the right person to put in place, wasn't he? And the thing about it was his mission was to show that that underachievement and so on was not down to racism in society. It was down to difficulties, if not with individuals. I sort of moved on from racism in terms of individuals in this respect, but I'm talking about weak cultures and things like that. Well, if you know the cultures we're talking about, they're anything but that. But anyway, this was a sort of thing. And of course, it had the support of Keith Joseph. And Carlton tells of the story of how Swan invited him to dinner at his posh residence. And he did so. There are a number, about 5 or 6 people, African Caribbean people on the committee, and he didn't take them all together. He took them one by one to try and point out the errors of their thinking. Anyway, they stuck it out. A number of people resigned from the committee because of this. But anyway, what happened in the end, you may remember, the Swan report was printed, and Swan himself did a little booklet, and that was issued to all the schools. It was Thatcher's government, wasn't it, with I think Joseph, and they sent this summary, which was denying that racism was a problem. We need to look in different places. So what this is about is it's time to campaign for the proper launching of these reports, of the recommendations of these reports. Now, on this, you can see that the booklet that we're doing is, I've got it somewhere. Where is it? Oh, missing at the moment. It's got hidden. You've got a little booklet, Deep Issues and Resources. I think some people may have seen the introduction to this because I've got it on, put it on my weblog, which is John Tyrrell blogs, or get it from johntyrrell.co.uk, but you can see a little bit more about that, the first part of the issues anyway. We're still working on the resources, so it's work in progress. But anyway, the idea is to signpost both human and multimedia resources to schools and beyond. Though we're not stopping at schools. This can be for anybody who wants to look at issues within the police force, within the health service, and so on. So there should be stuff there that is useful beyond schools and colleges. So as it says, it's producing a handbook for schools and beyond to support education and training, schools, colleges, institutions, to tackle inequalities arising from racism and injustice. But of course, I mean, we're talking about something which is deeply ingrained, and this is the problem. How do you counter it? And I think, I don't want to repeat what we were doing actually in the 70s and 80s, although we were challenging this. We were working within institutions which challenged us at the time. And I mean, I remember this, how it's, well, quite frankly, some of us were sidelined if we got too challenging in that way. So what we've got here is black members of the UK Parliament have spoken out about Westminster Parliament being a white man's club. And Dawn Butler, she called for decolonisation of the national curriculum. And I don't know whether this will work, but if you click on this, it should get to, now then. No, it's not going to work. I was hoping this might load up.
Looks as if your computer's about as well behaved as mine is at the moment, John.
Well, I think it won't. Yes, it's not the computer. It's just not doing what I want it to do. No, anyway, let's dispense with that now. Can we go back and stop the screen sharing?
Yeah, I think so. If you can
Stop
manage
share, yeah. Okay.
that, great.
Right. Okay. So I'll take on from there, but I'll refer to the document now. Yeah, Dawn Butler. It was Black History Month. She stood up in Parliament and asked for decolonisation of the national curriculum, and that was during the debate then. And she got some opposition from black members of the Parliament sitting on the sitting opposite from the government. Anyway, so there's a big issue to face there. So what we're asking is we'd like some people to send endorsement if they support this project, and the address of that is, I'm not showing it now, obviously, but it's our address, email address is deepproject, and it's deep_project@aol.com. You've got it, and it works, Liz, because you responded to an email on it.
And I can include the copy of the document when we post up this recording.
We can
So that would be good. That's it. Yeah, we will. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. deep_project@aol.com.
Yeah.
It's just a brilliant project, John, and sometimes it comes really hard to look at the past and have to be looking at it again, but we do need desperately this work to be done. So I'm really pleased. So have you got a little bit more you want to tell us about?
Well, I could go on to say a little bit more about the project itself, but as I say, it's working underway, and that will probably be better to try and do it. And I if I'd got time, I would have tried to get some of the colleagues in at the moment. I mean, it's early for Carlton at the moment. He didn't make it, but I mean, it got interesting with him. I was talking to him the other day, and talking about your storms. When I was speaking to him, he said, "Well, I've just got Hurricane Elsa hovering overhead." I think by that time it had calmed down to a tropical storm. And it was a calm before the storm. They got some rain and flooding, but all that was has been affecting him anyway in that way. But the thing itself, I say, there's a lot that could be said, and I mean, I could just say a little bit about how we're approaching it and where we've got to with the booklet that I showed you, the issues and resources.
John, before you go on to tell us a bit more about it, let's have a chance for people to ask some questions or make some comments.
Okay, of course.
It would be helpful, so because people have got to set it into their own context.
Yeah.
And you got a comment you want to
Well,
make?
I was actually just going to ask more about the issues and resources booklet, and in what form you were planning to either reproduce it or have it online, and how you were going to make it known to others to be able to make use of, and how it will be a resource in itself. I'd like to hear more about those plans.
Well, that's our question as well, how we best do this, because at the moment we haven't got a website, for example, and I don't know amongst us. I don't want to spend too much time dealing with that, but we haven't got a resource bank to dip into, so we're looking at this, and the idea was to make a booklet as in the form that we've got, but as it happens, as we're developing this and putting it on the website, it goes a lot deeper, because you can actually just click on issues on the on links on the pages, and it takes you into a whole range of things. So I mean, the way that it's actually started, and it has been trial and error, but I found, for example, now let's start by thinking about the Black Lives Matter. We've been discussing that, and I mean, there again, people have said, "Oh, that becomes an issue," and so on. Well, what we've been saying about that is, well, you can actually change this to say, "All lives matter," yes, but I mean, we're talking about oppressed people in this kind of way. If we're talking about decolonization, we've also got to remember that you don't have to be black to be colonized, as the Irish story tells us. So there are all sorts of dimensions to this, in which we want to try and get away from this thing about stereotyping, and this is all about one group of people. It can happen to anyone. But the issue is, at the moment, we know from Black Lives Matter that it's an issue now. And somebody answered this quite brilliantly by saying, well, look, it's this group whose lives are at risk, and so on. As we've seen from COVID, we've seen from continuing police action. As I say, I've been involved with cases in Birmingham myself and in Wolverhampton, of police brutality to black people. So, you know, that's where we're at the moment, and that's what we're addressing here. So we want to be clear about that. But it's so easy to, when you're doing these things, instead of addressing decolonization, you can actually be reinforcing it in some ways. And that's what, I mean, I think that's, looking back to our experience before, we've got to re-examine that and make sure that we don't follow that up. So let's think about how we're sort of addressing that. I mean, we chose, first of all, one group, which is Pan-Africanism. And I've got this book, Pan-Africanism. It's by a history by Hakim Adi. And if you look at this book and turn the pages, we're not just addressing and picking out one person. I mean, we could have started with Nelson Mandela or something like that. But in this book, you've got, the way we'd approach it, you've got hundreds of names. And well, how does that help people? Well, I mean, first of all, people can make their own choice, and so there's a lot of material there. But I think we're talking about having signposts and using signposts to point out different things. So we're pointing to this massive experience. I mean, the people who are telling the story of colonialism are the people themselves who've faced it. And I know that's a theme that has been among this group. We've been talking to people who've got first-hand experience in that respect. So that's one thing that we're looking at, and using C.L.R. James' view, when he started the, I've mentioned this before, the Black Jacobins, he writes in that, he said, I'm tired of reading about black people of Africa, African descent being acted on. I'm writing about people being active on a grand scale in history. And that's what you've got here in that respect. It's not just that. There's all sorts of individuals then. And more importantly, bringing it up to now, because one of the criticisms immediately is, well, we're talking about history. And I said, well, we're stuck about the history curriculum in school, which you know, we did previously. We concentrated on history, didn't look across the curriculum. And remember, there was a lot of movement on subjects across science, whatever, arts, and so on. So it needs to be all embracing. How do you deal with that? There's such a mass there. How do you actually deal with it to make sense? That's our question. And honestly, if you've got comments to make, I mean, just, you know, endorse this, yes, but if you've got ideas and advice that you think, then please communicate that to us at the address I've given you. That would be welcome. So yeah, involving more people is one of the things in that way. We have weekly Zoom meetings, but it's amongst ourselves at the moment. And we are inviting other individuals in, but we could open that up a lot more once we've got this a bit more established, I think.
John, they're just doing brilliantly, and I think, you know, the developing projects that we're hearing about, and yours being one of them, is absolutely fantastic. Now, I think if we go on and have a reflection on what we've done over the last 36 weeks, you may get some ideas coming from that. But before we go on to that, is there anything else anybody particularly wants to comment on to John or to ask John? Okay, then, so I'll
I just like to get his email address. I thought I'd written it down, but I don't can't find it.
Right, I'm just going to screen share my thing, which needless to say has disappeared.
I have a question too, Liz.
Okay.
Hi, Liz.
Levi, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I just had a question for John.
Yep.
So John, first of all, John, I'd just like to say much of what you were talking about before about the British education system and West Indian children, that relates to myself because as the son of West Indian migrants to the UK, I grew up in the education system, and I attended secondary school, Perry Beaches, between 1971 and 1977.
Of fame.
Sorry?
Of fame.
So
Perry
right back
Beaches can be quite notorious, didn't it?
Indeed. But I mean, I left the UK 30 years ago now, so it's a long time. But I just wondered whether or not the focus of the project also includes the experiences of African migrant kids as opposed to kids of African Caribbean descent, and whether it also includes kids from Asian and Indian backgrounds, their experiences as well in the education system. And I guess whether or not the African kids from the African continent, you know, because my understanding is that there's been a lot of migration and refugees from the African continent to the UK, whether or not their experiences are very similar to what I would have experienced and the West Indian kids' experience back in the 70s and the 80s, or whether or not there's been any improvement or any noticeable changes.
No, indeed. I think I think that is I think that's basic. I mean, yeah, we're talking about the whole of the system, the whole of the empire in this respect. And I've had something this week which has gone into focusing on India, which we haven't done. I mean, our group at the moment is there's Carlton, Gilroy, Lance. They're all Jamaican, they're all African Caribbean. We've got a teacher who was working with us, Fayaz Hussain, who's from Pakistan. She's going to be doing a lot more on history from the subcontinent. Well, she's working with adults at the moment, you know, she's got lots of ideas. She's a fantastic person. I say that talking at this stage is going to show, and this is one of them, that it's showing just where we've got to, where we've started from. But I mean, if it's coming out as this is just history, this is just about Africa, and so on. The whole thing applied to a whole lot of other places. And two, I mean, the other thing that has come to me in terms of recently is what's going on. And if we look at Canada, we look at the diamonds there, we look at, apart from Africa, you know, if you look at the issues about diamonds in Africa, somebody wrote to me to say, look, it's not just diamonds, there are no such things as clean diamonds. In Canada, people have been displaced, and we've seen that in Canada, all the kids, the First Nation kids who were taken, I mean, it's like the story we have in Africa, but it's happening here in Canada. You don't expect, where children are abducted, taken to schools, abused, and you find, you know, and that transfers itself to First Nation people. I mean, you know, you have the story in Australia.
It's the same thing, yeah, exactly the same. Stolen generation, we refer to, where kids were taken away from.
Levi, you, excuse me interrupting, you raised a couple of really good points there. One is that there are now adults who are very competent professionals in their own field, and you're in education, for example, who were children who went through this situation where children were identified as having learning difficulties and put in ESN schools. So that's a really important point. And also the point that you've raised about African Caribbean, African and Asian stroke other, if I can put it in that way. I think one of the things in the Black History Month, Black History Lunchtime conversations that we've seen is that you can't just focus on one, you really need to broaden out your understanding. And yet what you're talking about, John, was an in those early days and those early reports was essentially it was targeted against the West Indian, as it was called then, the Caribbean community and the Caribbean children, partly because of language issues. Now, we can talk about this again, and I think it would be really useful too, but I think you ought to be co-opting Levi as an educationalist onto your committee, or at least inviting him to speak to you, because he's got first-hand experience of what it was like to be a child in that situation.
Levi, I invite you this minute. I mean, we have meetings at 4:30 on Tuesdays afternoons to fit in Carlton. So if you're free on one of those afternoons, please join us. Can I just say though that I mean, you see, you trigger things when you're asking these questions, because if one of the things that came out of this for me, Pan-Africanism. Now, one thing that makes sense within the British curriculum, it then links to what happened in 1900 with the first Pan-African conference. And we have there a whole lot of people attending. Now, I mean, they're from Africa, they're from America, the Caribbean, and so on. But when they come into it, there's somebody there, there's Nairobi, who was the first Asian Member of Parliament, remember, in 1892. He's gone there because he's fighting for home rule in India. So so there's a link immediately, which so we don't want to reinvent the wheel and write everything ourselves, but there is a pointer there to another tradition. The other thing coming out of this as well, and there's a site which I mentioned, it's website which has got 50 of the greatest Pan-African. The first 25 are all men, but then in the second 25 it talks about other people, and it brings in some women. And I mean, an outstanding woman comes, Anna Cooper. She's somebody we need to point to, because we're bringing in, well, I mean, I'm just making the point that I haven't said anything about women in this, and that has to be brought in. Yeah, I can go on all day, I'm sorry, but
well, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Levi, for your input. You're going to be up at goodness knows what hour of the night. I have no idea. Levi's here in Melbourne with me. Okay, so if it's okay with you, thanks ever so much, John, and we're going to follow your developing project, your deep project. It's a really, really good one, and you've got some phenomenal people on your committee. I know a number of them, and great respect to you.
Can I ask for Levi's email address, please? Levi, would you let me
That's
know?
come to you. All
Yeah,
right.
Liz can forward it. You can forward it, Liz. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. I hope this is going to work. Is it working? Can you see today's poster?
Absolutely. Yep.
Right, well, I thought that we would reflect, review and forward plan, researching and learning about. We started learning about Black history, then we felt it needed to be African history. Professor Sati pointed that out. They don't call it Black history. And really colonial history is the other key element to all of this, which broadens it out considerably. So thanks to everybody. And John Tyrrell spelt wrong on his wonderful De-colonising the Education Development Project, DEEP. Okay, so next. So I just want to introduce some of the presenters and the folks who are active in supporting our Black History Lunchtime conversations. So Yasser Safari has joined us, Professor Sir Jeff Palmer, Professor Sati Fakshat, Jim Thakdordin. I'm sorry Jim's not here today because he's really keen that we work hard to move this forward, and Dr. Hilary Robertson Hickling. Apu Bagha Madan Al-Shabazz was fantastic introducing his story. Again, John, for your information, Apu was brought up in South Wales, and he would have been part of that whole generation of kids from West Indian heritage, as it was called then, who really suffered badly in our school education system. Professor Chris Evans, Bernard Janke from the Jamaican Memory Bank, Dr. Christine White is with us today. Brilliant, Christine. Dr. Richard Anderson, who's been a great support as well. Helen, your name's down here. Thanks so much for all you've done. And Bill and Dave came along at one stage talking about historical roots, and also to Gwyneth Kessler. I'm not sure if I've got your name right or wrong now, Gwyneth. Anyway, David Simon Martin was here. John, spelt right, Ange Grunsel. Oh, I'm managing to get all the names. So thanks to everyone. So it's a summary of the content of the Black History Lunchtime conversations. I've been busy working at this for the last couple of days, so I hope it's going to be okay. It's to give you a feel, if you joined part way through or whether you've laboured all the way through with this, just what we've covered. It's been absolutely amazing. But now we need to rationalise and strategise as to where the gaps are and what we can do with this wealth of information we've collected. So we're going to be looking at what we did with British perspectives on Black history, British perspectives, and we also will be looking at African and other Caribbean perspectives on Black history. And it is important to recognise that every country has its own Black history or African history or Australian history, and you have to deal with your own first, but to see them all in context, I think that's why John was bringing up the point about the Canadian residential school scandal. Sadly, there are echoes of similar treatment around the different colonies. So we focused on Wales and the slave trade. We focused on Scotland and slavery. Big thanks there, especially to David Alston, but also Dr. Christine White and Dr. Richard Anderson. Great support there. British links with indentured labour, really, really important that Dr. Jim Thakdordin pointed out that this was something we really needed to include, and it certainly is, and it's certainly something that I've learned a lot about during the year. The early Black presence in Britain has been an interesting theme to follow through, also British explorers and missionaries. Whoops a daisy, need to go back now. Right, so in exploring aspects of African history and African perspectives on the slave trade, we've looked at the Scramble for Africa and Colonialisation. which I call Colonialisation, which is why I spell it in 2 different ways. And the Africans who supported the British explorers, the Congolese history, the Ugandan history, Nigerian history we've covered, looking at perspectives on the Scramble for Africa, African perspectives. We need to look at South African history, and I put myself little notes in italics at the bottom if it's something that we really haven't looked at and we ought to. There's so much African history. It's a continent, there's so many countries. So I've included some of the flyers that I've sent out, which have been invaluable in helping me to remember what we've done. Then the Caribbean perspective. So we've got British perspectives, African perspectives, now we're on to Caribbean perspectives on the slave trade, colonialisation and legacies. The big legacy, one of the big legacies, is the Windrush story and the creation of the Jamaican diaspora. And we've explored quite a bit about the Windrush departure and those who were left behind. Then the Caribbean languages we've looked at, those were created during the times of slavery. We also need to look more at this issue of Black languages. And then other colonial histories. So I brought in throughout the weeks comments and information as I was desperately trying to absorb as much information as I could to understand about learning about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, and so shared that last week. And then other less known aspects of world history. Well, we've had some fascinating presentations, haven't we? I think the one on bark cloth was the one that with Josie Hendon that I knew least about. The one on wool presented with Caroline, and the one on cotton. Thank you very much, Simon. That was so interesting. We haven't done anything on the importance of music in African and Caribbean cultures and influence on the world. We've also
That'll be a big one.
That would be a really good one, Liz.
That'll be a great one.
What I thought that'll perk things up a bit. Then telling the stories of Black and African history. We've had authors, we've had historical novels. Thank you very much indeed. We've had academic research presentations, we've had poetry, we've had storytelling, we've had creative arts, we've had food, we've had community research projects, and we've also developing projects and teaching resources, including African history in Africa and the Caribbean. So we've been looking at all sorts of things and bringing our understanding up to date, exploring the issues created by the enslavement of Africans, the implications of the establishment of indentured labour and the creation of the British and European empires. I'm really interested in the European empires, finding out what they were onto. The talk we had about Sweden was great. We're also looking at community reparation. What are the current approaches? What other current approaches are there? The CARICOM initiative, the reparation unit at the University of the West Indies. Barbados has said that they're going to become independent of the Queen. So we've got quite a few interesting things going on. I also the Uluru Statement of Part of Victoria's Truth-Telling Initiative. Okay, who's got the mic on? Right, now, take a bit more time to go through all of these things and think about who's spoken and what we could look at next. So if you do want to shout out, do, but while I'm doing the PowerPoint, I can't see everybody else at the same time. So British perspectives on Black history. British Black history. Let's have a look and see who's John. Switch your mic off, please. John Samuel, switch your mic off, will you? John Sam, okay. In Britain, we lifted the idea of Black History Month from the States, and we have tended to follow the States model as opposed to looking at the British perspective. And when you think about institutional racism, I was just wondering if there oughtn't to be an expression called national racism, because we've had the example in South Africa and all the battles that were there to try and get better conditions for the black people in South Africa. We've also got the fights in the States still going on about equality for black people. And in the UK, we've also got issues about a national racism. So I don't know, we need to be thinking about these things. And I need to talk to others who are interested, and we can explore, because until we can get the words right, how are we going to teach our children? Right, then we focused on Scotland and slavery because David Alston's one of the trio who got this going, along with Simon and myself. He's going to publish his book Slaves and Highlanders later this year. But during the year, he's also developed a campaign to repay the Dick bequest to Jamaica, and he's going to be sending us an update for next week. He's not able to be with us today. But that's interesting because through these conversations, he's made links with me and the reparation unit at the University of the West Indies. Dr. Richard Anderson also presented about slavery at the university and the country house in northeast Scotland. And that was fascinating because for many of us, we had no idea about any of this history of Scotland. And Christine, you've shared so much with us. And you've got lots more you can share, and we'll look forward to that. And also Professor Sir Jeff Palmer, who spoke about not taking the statues down, take down racism. So underpinning all of this is challenging racism. It's not necessary, and we just have to get that through in all our teaching. And a focus on Wales and the slave trade came from my particular interest in Wales and my colleagues in Wales. So Professor Chris Evans has written the excellent book Slave Wales. If you want to really understand the dimensions of Wales's involvement in the slave trade, that's the book to read. The Penance Project's the project that Caroline and I are involved in with other colleagues, and we're now setting up the Jamaica Wales Alliance non-governmental organisation in Jamaica to manage the reparations support and funding. And Seema, I've included you because your work on Flintshire and the slave trade, absolutely magnificent. That's a really brilliant additional resource.
Thank you.
The British links with indentured labour, we're introducing Jim Fakordin's story. This really put it very much into a central focus for me. And when we contacted some of Cassandra's colleagues, there was a suggestion that we had a future seminar specifically focused on this, bringing some of the leading folks in the world, who academics and activists, to tell those stories. And what we're realizing more and more is how valuable it is to have things on YouTube. A seminar on YouTube can be watched by thousands and thousands of people over time. So it's really worthwhile putting in a good deal of effort into those sorts of things. Then we focused quite a lot. It's really interesting when I analysed all of this, you can see where we did a lot and where we didn't do a lot. But the early Black presence in Britain, I think, is a fascination, and that's about learning our own history in Britain. Belong's presentation about the life and times of George Africanus was fascinating. And as a community research project, that was absolutely excellent. And Tony Talbot told us about History on the Page, Adventures in Black History. I think it's 10 individuals he talks about. And that's a children's book. And I felt that was important as well, because we're talking about work for children in supporting children in schools to understand Black history better. And there's not that many suitable publications. Then creating education and training opportunities for Africans in Wales. We're going to do more on this next week, so I'm really pleased that we're able to get Robert Burrows to do that, and he's writing a book which will be published next year. Lawrence Scott gave such an interesting session about his book Dangerous Freedom, a fantastic historical novel. based on research into the life and times of Dido Bell. It's so cleverly written. It really is a masterpiece, or a person piece, or whatever you say. So Dr. Christine White again, who lectures, if I could spell properly, in global history from the University of Glasgow, a long way from home. Gosh, that was a really interesting talk that you gave. And Helen, who gave a presentation about the time Haile Selassie spent in the UK. So this is really the early and coming up to reasonably up to date, but Windrush, I suppose, was the next step after that. Then Simon and the team at Belong Nottingham shared the stories about Abdullah Sussi, James Tuman and Jacob Wainwright, who were the Africans who supported David Livingstone's explorations in Africa and brought his body back to the UK. And the discussion about Henry Morton Stanley's role in the Scramble for Africa. So many thanks, Gwyneth Kessler.
You spelt me right there.
Oh, it's Kensler. It is Kensler. Thank you, Gwyneth. Thank you. I'll stick it in my mind now. Thank you for that. So that was all so interesting, and that's a big debate that's going on. I don't know if we've if you want to do us a bit of an update, Gwyneth, on that. Has anything more been happening about the statue or anything else?
Not at the moment. It's quiet. But I would hope that in November, I think it's 150 years since Stanley met Livingstone. So 150 years. I'll look to see when exactly, but I don't know. Yes, the 10th of November. So that's quite momentous.
And maybe we could do a seminar around that and get different people speaking. But it was great to have your colleague, Tim
Gill. Yes, Tim Gill.
Yeah. Tim Gill to speak about his book and his research.
Yes.
Absolutely fabulous. Thanks ever so much then for that. And
Could
then we also...
Could I just add something there, Liz? I'm in touch with Gwyneth to try and explore doing something next year, to have a half day or a whole day addressing issues of Black history and Wales, bringing in Paul Robeson, the singer, a Nigerian singer that's got a program about Paul Robeson. He's got a play. And to raise issues about Stanley, because there are conflicts between the historians. You've got Tim Gill, who wrote the biography about Stanley, but then there's 6 or 7 other historians that sort of argue with Tim, and the other historians, I feel, are largely potentially being narrow-minded and defensive. But we felt that in Denby there needs to be a sort of balanced debate chaired by the local MP or professor from SOAS or something, so that there could be a decent educated debate. Otherwise, it's just a culture war potentially. Anyway, I won't go on, but I can write about this later if necessary.
Thank you very much, Martin. And I think we really understand, and by involving Gwyneth, having been involved in some of the discussions before, I really understand where you're coming from, and I think it's good to be community researchers.
Can I just add there, sorry Liz, can I just say that's a brilliant idea. I mean, when I did the research for The Butterfly and the Bee, I read every one of Stanley's books and autobiographers, including a translation of a Welsh one. And I have to say there was a lot of negative, but then you have to remember that, you know, he was the poor boy made good who upset the Royal, Geographical Society in the 19th century and has upset an awful lot of people since. But I do agree with you. And I think Gwyneth and I had always talked about the fact that there could be a brilliant debate looking at both sides. So, yeah, I really look forward to that. And being close to Denby, I'd definitely be visiting it.
You're going to be on the management team of that one then. Okay.
I'd be happy to.
But I think
Great.
if we can present that professionally as a Zoom seminar, it's okay having a half-day conference or a day conference for those of you who aren't going to be bothered about COVID in the future. But the advantage of doing a Zoom conference is that you have it recorded for posterity, and it is so valuable, and then it can be used as a teaching resource, because I've been talking to Simon saying we've got to be able to learn to edit things down so that we've got really efficient and watchable items that go out onto YouTube, and that's what the schools are going to be looking for. So we need to get the schools involved as well, Helen, and perhaps you could take a role there along with Gwyneth. So it's great, wonderful. Got great support there. So that's a really positive one. Then the point about the theme that we've been following about the Africans in Wales at the African Institute. That was really interesting, and it'll be picked up next week. And also we've mentioned here Helen's research and her book again. And Helen explained through her work, helped me to understand how important historical novels were and how to respect researchers. So it's a good one, that. Right, so other European links with enslavement. Sorry, I'm just making my screen clear. Other European links with the enslavement of Africans and colonialisation around the world. So Professor Frederick Thomason, we weren't able to record his presentation. He preferred us not to, but this was absolutely fantastic, and it will be really interesting with such a good track record. I'm sure we'll get other people who'll be willing to speak about other aspects of other countries' colonialism. Okay, so now we're going to look at exploring the aspects of African history and African perspectives on the slave trade and struggle for Africa and the Africans who supported British explorers. So in terms of African history, right early on, I discovered the UNESCO project on the history of Africa, where African historians and academics present the story of their country or an aspect of African history. That is absolutely fantastic. There are 20 episodes there. I can't confess I've watched all 20, but I watched quite a few of them. They're really fantastic. Looking at other perspectives on the Scramble for Africa, Professor Satif Pakshat helped us to do that. That was very valuable. We also looked at Congolese history, because some of us, particularly in North Wales, have been exploring along with Norbert and his colleagues this story, which links into the African Institute story. So we were also able to have Yarkil to share his approach to using hip hop and rap. So we have had some music, well, hip hop and rap, to get the message over, the discussion about how to engage young people. And also the work of Chief Thomas Bikebi, who I could listen to forever. He's got such interesting stories to tell. Then we looked at Nigerian history and focused on the Benin bronzes and the reparation discussions that are underway, well underway now, I think. And Dr. Richard Anderson helped us to understand more about that and to understand more about the story of the Benin bronzes. It's a particularly poignant story about how they came to be looted by the British forces. We also explored a little about Ugandan history, but we've done nothing about South African history. Then there are other stories of colonialisation and our shared history, because we've got US and Canada. So Professor Lucy Bland was able to tell us about Britain's brown babies, telling the story of the children of black GIs born in the UK during World War II. And that was really eye-opening and fascinating. And a group of they're adults now, they're well into the 70s, if not 80s, and really some tragic stories, but some positive ones. And Dr. Bunmi-Oisan has been so supportive of us, and she specifically spoke about the 100th anniversary of the 1921 attack. Start wrong, right. On Greenwood, the Black Wall Street of Tulsa, US. That was a terrible story. And here, John, I've mentioned the Canadian colonial history we need to follow up of the, particularly exploring the deaths of the children taken into residential schools. Really, one of the sources of learning about Black history is the news. But I don't know what British news is like, but here they report all sorts of interesting things. In Australia, because we're looking at Aboriginal rights and the impact of colonialisation, so I've told you about NAIDOC Week, which this week we've had lots and lots of programs on all the channels, advertisements, and tomorrow I'm going to a healing ceremony. The local tribe here, Warrangung, their leader is going to do a healing ceremony because this area that I'm living in at the moment has been so badly decimated by a storm over a month ago now, but the clearing still goes on. The Uluru Statement from the Heart is also a very active activity. So put myself a note here. I want to explore about the Welsh plantation owners in Australia, because there are two sides to this history. There's the side of the colonisers here, and that needs well understanding. There's a great series though called The First Australians, told you about last week. So other colonial histories to explore: New Zealand, which is quite different, first American peoples, first Canadian peoples, South American peoples, and the importance of cloth and other commodities in world trade. Josie Hendon did this brilliant session. If you missed out on it, it's number 6. Really fascinating to learn about bark cloth. Another fascinating presentation was Simon's one on cotton. And Lisa Gabbard has been telling us about her wool project and the impact of wool, or the significance of wool in world trade. And she's going to talk to us in the next season. And then the Windrush stories, the history, with an interesting focus on Windrush departure. We're getting used to hearing the stories of people who came on the Windrush and over later years, but it's about hearing about the people who were left behind. And so again, we're looking at that with Dr. Hilary Robertson Hickling. Jim Thakdorin's story is relevant in this context, and his work with Enrico Stennett. Levi Lawrence introduced his father's story, and we were able to do a conference on Windrush with the North Wales Jamaica Society, so that's recorded and will be posted at some stage. And Bill Hearn from Historical Roots is exploring the stories of all those who sailed on Empire Windrush. I think he's up to about number 68, he was telling me, or 69. And there's a couple of hundred or so, at least more. So that'll be really interesting. Then the development projects. Well, we've supported, or we've been listening to and hearing about the International Talent Outreach Project of my fellow John Samuels. That's fabulous. The North Wales Africa Society is now well established, and they've now got the North Wales Africa and Caribbean Centre. So it's really good to know that during this past year, there's been some significant progress on different projects that are related to what we've been interested in. We'll talk here about the bequest, which hopefully then the funds will be used in Jamaica as opposed to benefiting schools, continuing to benefit schools in Scotland. The Books to Africa project was really interesting to hear about, and we need to make sure that we get some books on the way to Professor Sati in Jos in Nigeria. Historical roots again, and the Teach Plaques was really, really interesting, with Gloria Davis telling us about what she's doing, and we'll be inviting her back to tell us how she's got on. So we've done 3 sessions, or one in each season. Think about what we're doing and to move on. And then our focus, I suppose, is in terms of teaching and supporting better understanding. So this particular reflection here is all the sessions that we've looked at teaching African history in Africa, in the Caribbean, and in the UK. But you need different resources to teach in the different areas. So Professor Bachat is looking at his project to create local resources at basic education level, now that history, never mind about Black history or African history, but history is back in the curriculum, which is a change in political direction, a very positive change. Talked about John's project, and next week Charlotte Williams is going to tell us about teaching Black history in Welsh schools. The community research projects, with these are other themes. So we're tending to go over things again and again, but it's to show that we've come at things from all sorts of different directions. So it's great, all the work that has been done by Belong Nottingham. Learning Links International's done various research projects, community research projects. John Evans from the Newtown Textile Museum presented his research story about Thomas Davis, who was presented with the Gold Chalice for his excellent work in West Africa as a factor for the East India Company. So we need to keep following up that story. And also Bunmi's great work with the Sankova Pan-African series, and also her classroom research in Nigeria. She was telling us in one session about the local Black children who they repeated a very well-known exhibition activity, to research activity, to see if white children prefer Black dolls or white dolls. In the research in Nigeria, Black children preferred white dolls as well. So there's that's impacted on her decisions, and she's now creating books with positive images of Black children for children back home in Nigeria, and I hope in other places in the world. So more community research projects. Helen and I have been talking about the time Haile Selassie spent in the UK, and Helen did a presentation on that. Talked about Bill and David's work. Cassandra, we've talked about resources she produced for Nottingham to tell the stories of George Africanus and Eric Irons, and there was a really good model of very good presentations. And Gloria Davis, we've spoken about, and Professor Patty. So Hiasta Safari has joined us for a number of sessions, more than I've even indicated there. The #1, #4, #5, etc. shows those are the sessions. Simon numbers the sessions in chronological order, whereas I number them with seasons. So I've gone on to Simon's method of identifying where the recordings are. We also were joined by the Welsh national poet Ivor Glyn, presenting his Windrush poem. Jean Samuel showcased his work. We talked as well, and Maggie did this great link, the Black History links with Gumbo. Now, at one stage, I was managing to keep up to date with updates and PowerPoint presentations with all sorts of interesting links. The last few weeks, I've not been able to do that, but certainly I found a great program on one of the channels, Netflix, that really talks a lot more about the history of Gumbo and the other African dishes that are enjoyed still in the southern states. We talked about African Caribbean languages. I actually added a couple of links here because Morgan Delphinis has been doing lots of other work this year, and he's got some really interesting interviews recorded. And of course, we welcome Dr. Joseph Farquharson from the Jamaica Language Unit. That was great, make Jamaican one official language to do English. And how can we do more research, and how can we share more of the stories of Black and African history? Well, we've got articles, we've got fiction, we've got factual books, we've got poetry, songs, drama, documentaries, YouTube, TV channels, family and local history research, archives and museums. And this is what we need, I think, to share with schools, is that they need to be looking at Black history in their own local areas, and everywhere there are some sorts of links. So some of the many ways to undertake community research. Now, we've had so much academic support. Dr. Richard Anderson, Christine White, Richard Anderson's got himself on twice, Jeff Palmer, Chris Evans, Richard Burrows, Lucy Bland, Sami Pinsbari, Cassandra Gupta, and then Professor Frederick Thompson and Dr. Joseph Farquharson, Professor Sati Fakshat, and Lisa Gabbard. I'm sure there are some more as well, but thanks to everybody. And that's pretty remarkable, really. So I'm really, really very grateful. So what happened in the last year and a little bit more? Well, it's been a dynamic time with an increasing worldwide awareness of the impact of European colonialisation. George Floyd's death changed things, and the Black Lives Matter responses are now worldwide with an increased focus, whether it's statues or increased use of Zoom sessions and discussions. There's just much, much more. So we're keeping an eye on all of these things. So on behalf of the three of us, many thanks for your support. And many thanks to people whose names might be spelt right or they might not be. Just forgive me at the moment. Thanks to you all. And next week, we have His Excellency Seth George Ramakan, Jamaican High Commissioner, who's a really good speaker, and he's really, really very perceptive. Professor Charlotte Williams and Professor Robert Burrows. So we'll invite guests who've supported the conversation during the past year, but it's all getting a bit busy in July at this time of this season in the UK when you want to be out and about. So yeah, thanks very much. That's been that was a year that was really.
Can I say thank you, Liz, for putting all that together? It's now made me want to go back and look at some of the ones I missed. So thank you ever so much for that incredible, compilation. Well done.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, and congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. I think it's just been amazing. So we want it to be an accessible resource. So now that I've got that far and I've shared that with you, which was a necessary part of the process, we've got something to deal with, and we can work out how to group things. And having in the title Black History Lunchtime Conversations, in the UK we talk about Black history, but it's not always a term which enables us to explore some of the colonial histories, because they're not Black histories, they're histories with other countries that Britain invaded and other European countries invaded. So for me, the year has made me think in a much different perspective, really. Yep. Okay, so John Samuel, what are you going to share with us today then in way of an update? Is he there? Yep. Lunchtime, excellent.
Hello.
Hello. Okay.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you. What's your
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry for joining a bit late, and yes, I have some projects that I was working on, so I thought I could share some of the pictures today with us if we have some small time. So
Yes.
I did send them already to Simon.
Have you got them, Simon? Da, 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 da. Yep.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Just,
Hello.
yeah, I'm just getting the pictures up. It was telling me there's not enough memory, but hopefully that won't last. Maybe it will. Just give it a second. I just closed a couple of programs, so hopefully there will be. There.
Oh.
All right. As you can see, this is a joint effort to empower a Black girl. So the picture speaks for itself. For itself. Yeah.
Yes.
That one. It's a beautiful picture. I'm going to open them all in this other program in the meantime.
Yeah. Sometimes I paint the indigenous tribes of Africa. These are people from the Maasai in Kenya. I once visited them, so this time I've been trying to paint the people of countries that I have seen or that have been there. And I thought this was a good picture to draw. This is a painting anyway that I did.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Then these guys, yeah, these guys are like, they're going to fetch water. These are gallons of water, they are sitting on them. I saw this picture online and it looked so, one of my friends posted online and I thought, wow, let me do a copy of it. So this is my own drawing version. Apparently they are going to fetch water from a pipe-borne water source. Also, I've been working a lot on portraiture these days. So this is a painting that I did. And if people are, some of the people who are close to the cinema world would see that this is a guy called Idris Elba.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's actually a portrait that I did.
Excellent. You should submit that, Jean-Samuel, to the National Portrait Gallery. Don't they have an annual competition of portraits or an annual exhibition of people?
Okay.
Look that up.
Then
yeah.
This another portrait too. It's a well-renowned African American actor called Eddie Murphy. He starred in Coming to America and many other films.
Fabulous.
Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely outstanding.
All right, that is all for today. I just thought I should share what I've been doing in the background. Thanks a lot for listening. Yeah.
Fantastic pictures.
Thank you very much, Simeon.
Amazing. That one's so detailed.
Yeah.
And thank you for the little storylines behind them all. That's wonderful.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
I think what we'll say now is we'll wrap the session up. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. And then we'll carry on with some conversations afterwards. Okay then, thanks, Simon.
Okay.
Thank you.